The engine holds a steady note that fills the cab, with a faint rattle answering it from somewhere in the dash. Dust drifts through the headlight tunnel and turns the road into a narrow strip of pale ground. He keeps both hands on the wheel, knuckles taking the vibration as if it belongs there, and makes small corrections that feel older than thought. Stones at the shoulder flash once and vanish. He swallows and finds his mouth dry, the air tasting of dust and warm metal. His forearms stay tight, his lower back braced against the seat without a place to settle. Wakefulness isn't a feeling anymore, it's something he holds in position, the way he holds the wheel. He blinks once, slow, and keeps his eyes on the center of the light. The truck continues forward with the same pressure in the seat and the same hum under his feet. He shifts his grip a fraction, tests the line, and lets the engine's tone tell him he's still moving. The night stays unmarked, and the road keeps coming. Wind presses through a cracked seal in the door and dries his mouth. He swallows, lips sticking for a moment, and keeps his foot where it is. A pale pull-off opens beyond the shoulder, flat and quiet in the headlight spill, then slides out of view. He notices it without turning his head. The throttle stays steady, the engine note unchanged. Pressure builds behind his eyes as he weighs the effort of stopping against the effort already spent. He pictures climbing down, joints stiffening in the cold air, the delay of climbing back in. The thought costs more than it gives. His hands hold their place on the wheel, making the same small corrections as before. The cab keeps shaking, wind hissing at the seam, dust moving through the light. Nothing marks the choice as a choice. The road continues forward, and he goes with it. The tires hum at a steady pitch, joined by a faint metallic buzz that never quite settles. The seat fabric is damp against his back, grit worked into his sleeves where his arms rest. Ahead, the horizon line is gone, swallowed by a black sky that offers no edge to measure against. The engine carries the same unevenness it had before, a small hitch he recognizes without thinking. He keeps his posture fixed because moving asks too much. Numbness creeps into his thighs and stays, spreading until it feels like part of the seat. Attention flattens into routine, narrowed to sound and pressure. He tests the wheel with a slight turn and brings it back, the correction already familiar. The truck advances without promising anything beyond the next stretch of light. He keeps driving because driving is already happening, and the road answers with more of the same. The engine keeps the same steady tone, small rattles repeating in cycles, and the dim dashboard glow rests on his hands. A deep ache spreads across his shoulders and settles there, neck muscles pulled tight like cord. Sweat dries in thin lines along his back, leaving a faint salt sting. He adjusts his grip once, then stops adjusting, letting the vibration run through his arms. He blinks and feels the effort of it, the lid's heavier than before. The surprise lasts only a moment. The ache doesn't ask for anything anymore, it just stays. His shoulders remain lifted, stiff, and he drives with the pain present the way the engine noise is present, constant and unremarked. He swallows, tasting warm air and dust, and keeps his eyes on the strip of light ahead. The wheel hums under his palms as he makes a small correction and brings it back. The discomfort has flattened into something workable, no longer a signal to change or stop. He holds his posture, holds the line, and lets the body keep running alongside the truck, steady enough to continue. The tire hum rises and falls as his grip shifts without him noticing. His palms feel slick on the worn rubber, fingertips tingling where they press. The wheel drifts a fraction before he answers it, the road edge swelling closer in the light, then slipping back. Dust lifts behind him in a pale plume, visible for a moment in the mirror before it thins. He tightens his hold and corrects, a beat late, then eases back too far by a small amount. The motion shows up as sound first, the hum changing pitch, then as pressure in his wrists. Soreness builds there, fingers stiffening as he forces the line straighter. He swallows and sets his shoulders, breathing measured, eyes fixed on the center of the beam. The truck steadies, but only because he gives it more attention than before. Each correction asks to be watched. He keeps the wheel centered by effort now, listening to the tires and holding the pressure until it feels right again, steady enough to keep going. The engine is louder than his breathing, and his breathing is louder than it should be. Dust whitens in the headlights until the road becomes a flat wall of light. He stops scanning wide without deciding to. The far dark fades into something useless, too much effort for no return. His jaw stays clenched until it aches, face tight, throat dry. He watches only what the beam can hold, the center line, the edge as it comes and goes. Everything beyond that is left alone, allowed to exist without being read. The narrowing feels practical. It cuts away choices and leaves only what keeps the truck upright and moving. He swallows, adjusts his grip, and keeps his eyes fixed ahead. Tension settles into his face and stays there. The cab fills with sound and vibration, and his focus compresses to match it. Just the road, he thinks, and lets the rest fall away as the tires continue their steady hum. The cab sways faintly as the road bends, and darkness presses against the glass as if it has weight. His eyes feel gritty, lashes sticking where dried sweat pulls at them. Roadside brush lifts into the headlights and collapses again, quick silhouettes that stretch longer than they should. A low ridge rises ahead and holds its shape just long enough to resemble a vehicle, then breaks apart into bare ground as he draws closer. He blinks and feels a dull burn deepen behind his eyes. The motion doesn't reset what he sees. His gaze keeps reaching for meaning, trying to sort depth from shadow, and comes back uncertain. He adjusts the wheel by a fraction and watches the shape dissolve, recalibrating without confidence. The lights flatten distance, making near and far trade places without warning. Dust drifts through the beam and turns the air opaque for a moment. He leans forward slightly, as if that could sharpen the picture, and steadies his breathing. The night no longer feels empty. It presents options that vanish on approach, and his trust in his own sight thins with each pass. Not real, he thinks, holding the line as the road continues to slide toward him. The engine holds steady, and beyond it the silence feels absolute. His scalp prickles under the cap as he keeps his breathing high and shallow, careful not to let it hitch. The possibility of a shot exists without sound or signal. He does not search for a person. His eyes move instead to places where someone could be, dark cuts in the ground, a drainage ditch sliding past the lights and disappearing. He keeps his speed even, resisting the urge to ease off or push harder. The throttle stays where it is, the engine answering with the same tone. He shifts the beam slightly with small steering changes, never letting the light rest on one point for long. The motion feels deliberate, practiced, though it costs him effort. His shoulders remain lifted, muscles tight as if bracing for a crack that never comes. He swallows, tastes dust in the air, and listens to the truck continue forward, keeping the line and the pace, moving on. The tire hum stays constant, a steady layer beneath everything else. His heartbeat shows up in his ears, dull and regular, and the sound doesn't speed or slow. The sky ahead is black without an edge, offering nothing to measure against. Nothing happens, and the nothing carries weight. It presses in the same way dust does, present even when it settles. He keeps the same posture, shoulders held, hands fixed, speed unchanged. The road unrolls in the headlights with no interruption. The absence of a sound or flash does not loosen his chest. Tightness stays there, unmoving, as if it belongs. He swallows and tastes warm air, breath still shallow. Threat blends into the motion, no longer separate from it. He stops waiting for a moment to pass or resolve. The truck continues forward, tires humming, engine steady. Still here, he thinks, and lets the road keep coming. Vibration comes up through the seat like a persistent hand, never lifting. His hips feel cramped, knees held in the same angle for too long. He shifts slightly and meets resistance, joints answering with a dull refusal. The pale shoulder of the road widens in the headlights, then narrows again as he draws past it. For a moment he imagines pulling over, the weight of climbing down already settling into his legs. The thought carries images of stiff joints locking in the cold air, of standing still too long to climb back up easily. He keeps the engine running because it keeps everything else moving. Rest takes on the shape of risk. He swallows, jaw tight, and steadies his grip as another pull-off slips by. Relief comes only in not choosing it. The truck continues forward, vibration holding him in place, and he lets the road decide for him. He pulls a ration can closer with one hand, the rim catching a brief glint from the dashboard. The cab noise swallows the small sounds as he opens it and eats without slowing, jaw working more than his appetite. The food registers as texture and motion, nothing else. A metallic taste coats his tongue. He lifts the cup and takes a mouthful of coffee, feeling the warmth pass his lips before it turns bitter and flat, grit settling along the back of his throat. His stomach stays hollow, unchanged, as if it never received the message. He swallows because he knows he must, not because anything asks for it. The engine keeps its steady tone under his feet, tires humming as he chews. He wipes his fingers on his sleeve, adjusts his grip on the wheel, and lets the truck carry both of them on. The engine note fills the cab as a single tone, unchanged, and sweat cools along his spine where it has dried. He tries to count back, to place a start point, and comes up with nothing that holds. Minutes slide together without leaving edges behind. Road markings appear in the lights and vanish in rhythm, the only pattern that stays readable. His eyelids feel heavy, weighted, and he blinks slower than he means to. He stops checking anything that might mark time and lets that habit drop away. The next stretch of road becomes the only measure that matters. He makes a small correction, feels the wheel answer, and keeps the throttle steady. The blur settles and does not lift. He accepts it without comment, watching the markings come and go, and lets the truck carry him forward a little farther. The smell of gasoline sits in his throat even when nothing appears wrong, a dry burn that catches each time he inhales. He swallows and tastes it anyway. In the mirror, the dark outline of the load straps holds steady, then shifts by a fraction as the road dips. The suspension answers with a deeper bounce, a sound that carries more weight than before. He feels the cargo as a presence behind him, not seen but constantly accounted for. Each bump becomes a calculation made too late to revise. Too hard would mean strain, too fast would mean sway, too careless would mean something worse. He eases the wheel through a bend and feels the truck lean, suspension creaking as it settles back. Dust mixes with fumes and irritates his throat, making him clear at once and then stop trying. Confidence thins into caution. He keeps his speed even in his movements small, driving as if the load is listening for mistakes, as if it can feel every choice he makes. A sharper fuel smell cuts through the usual mix of dust and heat, reaching him before he can place it. He leans toward the dash and checks the gauges, fingertips cold against the metal bezel. The needle trembles with the truck's vibration, holding steady, then wavering just enough to invite doubt. His eyes track it longer than necessary, then return to the road. His stomach tightens into a dull knot as he runs through possibilities without speaking them aloud. A loose cap. A line rubbed thin. A container shifted just enough to weep. The engine tone stays the same, steady and indifferent, even as the smell changes again. He eases off the throttle for a moment, feeling the speed drop slightly, the suspension respond with less strain. He listens harder than before, head angled, waiting for a new sound that would force him to stop. None comes. The suspicion does not lift. It settles in place, and he brings the speed back up, asking the truck to tell him if something is wrong. A faint clink repeats somewhere behind him, regular enough to notice, irregular enough to doubt. He presses his tongue hard against his teeth and listens, trying to place it. In the mirror there is only darkness behind the load, no movement he can read. The sound might be new, or it might have been there all along. He cannot decide, and the uncertainty stays. His shoulders rise and hold, tension settling there as he replays the last moments. The sharper smell. The trembling needle. The bump that felt heavier than the rest. The clink comes again, swallowed by the engine, then returns. He adjusts his grip and keeps his eyes forward, attention circling the same narrow track. Rest drops away as an option. Every sensation asks to be checked. He listens again and lets the road continue to pull him on. The engine note shifts by a fraction, then shifts again, small enough to doubt but persistent enough to hear. Warm air pushes up into the cab, carrying the smell of hot metal and something damp beneath it. He feels the heat before he looks down, then watches the gauge climb a narrow distance and keep climbing. His face flushes, hands trembling as he keeps the truck moving a little longer, searching the shoulder for a safer edge. He eases off and lets the speed fall. The engine answers with a strange sound, uneven, as if resisting the change. When he finally pulls over, faint steam drifts up and becomes visible only when it crosses the headlights, then disappears back into the dark. He lets the engine idle and hears it ticking out of rhythm, metal answering metal. He steps down into the night, and the air feels colder at once against his face and wrists. His boots touch ground that feels too solid after the seat's vibration. He leans toward the front, breath fogging briefly, and listens to the engine complain softly as it runs. Not now, he thinks, hands hovering, and waits for the heat to tell him what to do next. He reaches for a latch and pulls back too late. Heat bites his fingers through the metal, sharp enough to clear his head for a second. He shakes his hand once, then wraps it in a damp cloth that darkens as it touches the skin. The cloth helps until it doesn't. He switches to a tool, metal clicking against metal, then sets it down and goes back to his hands when patience runs thin. The cap catches a faint glint in the headlight spill as he loosens it a fraction. He pauses when pressure hisses out, a thin sound that holds him still. His pulse quickens, fingertips burning, and he waits for the sound to fade before turning again. Each movement is smaller than the last, checked and rechecked. Silence returns around the engine. He straightens slowly, breath shallow, and keeps his hands close, counting the pauses before the next touch. He climbs back into the cab and takes the wheel with hands that hurt immediately. Blistered skin catches on the seam in the rubber, and he shifts his grip to avoid full pressure. The vibration that used to pass unnoticed now sends a sting through his fingertips with every small movement. He adjusts again, settling for a hold that hurts less but feels less certain. The gauge needle holds at a new position, steady enough to allow motion, watched more closely than before. He brings the truck back onto the road and feels the steering answer differently, not because anything has changed in the mechanism, but because he has. Grip strength is reduced, compensated for by attention and care. The road resumes its steady pull, engine tones smoothing out as speed returns. The cab continues to shake, and the pain stays present, folded into every correction. He keeps his eyes forward and his hands cautious on the wheel, reminding himself with each bend not to slip as the night carries on. Twin red dots ahead rise and fall as the road bends, appearing, fading, then returning in the same place. His eyes water from strain and fumes, vision blurring until he blinks it clear again. He measures the distance by feel more than sight now, counting the space with exhausted precision. Too close would mean metal on metal in the dark. Too far would mean losing the line the lights provide. The truck ahead slows by a fraction, and he answers without thinking, easing off just enough to match it. Tires across the convoy change pitch together, a shared response that settles his breathing. His chest stays tight, shoulders held lifted, as he adjusts again, keeping the red dots steady in his view. The rhythm is fragile, easy to break. He stops driving by his own sense of pace and lets the movement ahead set it. Speed changes ripple backward, and he follows them, careful not to introduce anything abrupt. The convoy begins to feel like a single body moving through the night, each part answering the others. He holds the gap and keeps the pattern intact, staying with them as the road continues to unfold. A faint knock slips into the engine rhythm and stays there, refusing to settle into the rest of the sound. Dust itches inside his ear canal, and a dull ache builds behind his temples as he listens. The hood line vibrates and the headlight bounce, offering no help in placing the noise. He tests the throttle gently, just enough to change the tone, and waits to hear what follows. The knock is swallowed by the drone, then returns, unchanged. He holds the speed steady after that, unwilling to provoke anything worse. Every sound turns into a question he cannot answer, each rattle asking to be sorted and filed. His breathing slows as his attention shifts fully to his ears. Temple pressure increases and stays there. He keeps listening, letting sight take care of itself, the road handled by habit. What is that, he thinks, and keeps the engine at the same pace, listening harder than before as the convoy moves on. Brake lights ahead brighten, dim, then brighten again, setting a pattern he watches closely. His tongue presses dry against his teeth as the convoy eases down for a moment. In the brief slowdown, a shoulder and helmeted shape are lit for a second through a side window, then gone. No words carry. Position and movement do all the talking. He reads the brake pattern as instruction and answers it without delay, easing his own speed to match. The lights become signals, stripped of anything else. Throat tightness stays as he keeps the gap measured, hands steady despite the sting in his fingers. The person ahead reduces to timing and distance, a reference point that keeps him in line. It feels necessary, efficient. He lets the reduction hold and follows the lights as they pull forward again, staying with the motion as the night continues. The air shifts and leaves a damp chill on his skin, cloth sticking to his back where sweat hasn't dried. The windshield begins to film, a thin haze that softens the road until the wiper passes and clears a narrow path. Under the tires, the surface feels different, less sure, the hum changing just enough to notice. Wind presses against the side of the truck in long, steady hands, rocking the cab a fraction left, then right. He keeps both hands on the wheel despite the pain in his fingers, joints stiffening as the cold works in. The wheel pushes back with each gust, asking more pressure to hold the line. His shoulders stay lifted, breath shallow, as he corrects and corrects again. The night doesn't grow louder or more dramatic, it simply becomes harder to read. The haze returns between wiper passes, the road blurring at the edges. He leans into the wheel and steadies the truck through another push of wind, holding it together as the cab sways and settles, telling himself to hold it as the road goes on. The wiper slows, hesitates, then drags across the glass, leaving a smeared arc that catches the light. He taps the switch and listens to a dry scrape answer back, strained and uneven. Wind noise rises along the door as the cab rocks again. He pulls a cloth free and leans forward, clearing a small patch by hand. The fabric is rough on the glass, cold water running over his knuckles as he steers with one arm. The road narrows into that strip. His forearm cramps under the effort of holding the line one-handed, fingers stiff around the wheel. He wipes again, presses harder, and the patch holds long enough to matter. The wiper scrapes once more and then settles into a slower rhythm. He brings his second hand back to the wheel as soon as he can, grip careful around the burn. Visibility stays imperfect. He adjusts to it, centering the truck on the clear strip and letting the rest blur. See enough, he thinks, and keeps moving. His eyelids feel heavy, lashes wet with condensation that blurs when he blinks. He stops expecting the windshield to clear all the way. The roadside edge stays soft and indistinct, while a narrow strip in the center of the light moves with the truck, steady enough to follow. Wind buffets the cab without changing, and the constant rumble fills the space where doubt might sit. He drives by the center of the headlight spill and the spacing of the convoy ahead, trusting fewer details with each mile. The dull ache in his eyes and brow settles into something manageable. Signals reduce to rhythm and distance, sound and pressure. The rest is allowed to blur. The reduction quiets him even as it narrows his margin. He holds the wheel, keeps the line, and lets the habit take hold because it works. Good enough, he thinks, and stays with the motion as the road continues. The engine drone continues without interruption, as if nothing has changed. He blinks, and the lane edge appears too close, then slides back into place with a correction he doesn't fully remember making. His eyes burn from dryness, tongue thick against the roof of his mouth as he swallows. The space between blinks stretches longer than it should, long enough to leave a hollow. His stomach drops, then flattens again as he realizes he may have lost a second without noticing it pass. He tightens his grip on the wheel, sits taller in the seat, and pulls air hard into his lungs, making his breathing loud in the cab. The truck stays steady, tires humming, giving no sign anything is wrong. The gaps return anyway. They come small and silent, folded into the motion of the road. He feels them more than he sees them, a soft absence that scares him by how ordinary it feels. He forces another breath, eyes wide on the light ahead, and tells himself to stay awake as the road keeps moving. He scrapes coffee grounds from the bottom of the cup and chews them, letting the bitter grit spread across his tongue. The taste is sharp enough to register. When it fades, he works his jaw back and forth until it aches, the motion loud in his head. He forces his breathing louder too, filling the cab with it so silence can't settle in. The dashboard edge vibrates in front of him, the needle trembling with the truck's motion. He presses a burned fingertip harder against the seam of the wheel and feels the sting flare, quick and precise. The pain cuts through the haze and holds his attention where effort alone cannot. He eases off, then presses again when the dullness returns. Each tactic costs something small and specific. Jaw soreness. Raw skin. A mouth that tastes of grit. He chooses the injury because it can be felt and measured. Feels something, he thinks, and keeps the truck steady as the road continues forward. Sweat cools under his cap and leaves his scalp itching as the suspension bounces in the same rhythm again and again. Road markings pass like identical cuts, appearing, vanishing, offering no proof of change. His head feels heavy, neck resisting when he tries to turn it even slightly. He reaches for the gauge and checks it, then checks it again moments later, finding the needle exactly where it was. He tries to recall what the last few minutes contained and comes up with pieces that won't line up. He searches the dark ahead for a landmark that might confirm time is moving, something that would separate now from before. The road answers with more of itself, unchanged. The effort leaves him tired in a new way. He accepts the uncertainty without comment. Memory thins until it can't be trusted to hold anything long. The mind stops keeping record and works only on what is in front of him. Did I just, he thinks, and lets the thought drop as the truck carries him onward. He notices the headlights as something separate from the road, a signal more than a tool. Sweat chills at his collar as air moves through the cab, and his hands stay damp on the wheel. The beam cuts sharply into dust, bright edges forming and dissolving as the truck moves. Beyond that light, the silence feels thick, watchful, pressing in without sound. He thinks about the switches without touching them. Too dim and the road disappears. Too bright and the light carries farther than it should. He keeps the beam as it is, a narrow compromise that shows enough ground to stay upright without throwing itself into the dark. The engine remains steady, its tone unchanged, as if unaware of the calculation. His shoulders stay raised and locked, muscles holding tension instead of releasing it. The idea settles that visibility works both ways, that the light gives and takes at the same time. He adjusts his grip, easing pressure without letting go, and keeps the truck moving through the illuminated strip. Too bright, he thinks, and holds the line as the dust drifts and the night receives the signal without answering. The red tail lights ahead dim through dust as the truck in front eases off, then steadies again. His breath stays shallow, throat dry as he watches the gap change by inches. He feels the choice before he names it. Closing in would tighten the group, light stacked on light. Falling back would leave him alone in a wider dark. His jaw tightens, teeth pressed together as he keeps his foot light on the pedal. He chooses a measured space and holds it by sound instead of sight. The engine tone lifts a fraction, then settles, each change counted by rhythm rather than distance. He adjusts speed in small steps, careful not to brake hard or flare the lights. The throttle moves just enough to answer the truck ahead without copying it exactly. The calculation comes slower now, but he forces it through, repeating the count in his head until it sticks. Keep the gap, he thinks, letting the engine's cadence replace numbers as the convoy breathes and moves on. He catches himself looking toward the hills again, then again, the motion automatic. Skin prickles along his forearms as the cab creaks and the suspension groans softly over uneven ground. Beyond the beam, a dark slope holds its shape without detail, featureless but present. He maps it anyway, marking places where someone could stand, could watch, could wait. Nothing appears, and that does not stop the scanning. His eyes return to the same points as if pulled there. Tightness settles in his sternum and stays, shallow breaths fitting around it. The road no longer feels empty. It stretches forward as watched space, every rise and cut carrying weight. The truck moves on, engine steady, tires humming. He keeps checking the dark without deciding to, letting the habit run because it no longer feels optional. Eyes on you, he thinks, and holds the wheel as the night continues to press in from both sides. A faint sign passes at the edge of the lights, followed by a turn that feels familiar enough to suggest the route is closing in on Oran. Distant lights sit low on the horizon, blurred by dust and movement. He feels no surge at the sight of them, only a thinning of dread that never turns into relief. The engine rhythm slows as the convoy compresses, trucks drawing closer in a controlled, tired way. His fingers cramp around the wheel and refuse to fully open when he loosens his grip. Stiff joints resist the change, holding their shape as if the drive is still underway. He flexes once, then stops, letting the pain settle back where it was. The lights ahead grow slightly larger, motion changing more than distance. The destination arrives as a shift in pace, not a reward. He follows the tightening line, hands aching, shoulders still raised. Almost, he thinks, but the thought carries no release. The truck continues forward, and so does he, not finished yet. His foot feels numb on the pedal, calf tight as he eases the truck into position with as little steering as possible. The ground ahead is lit unevenly, shapes breaking apart at the edges of the light. He brakes gently, careful not to jar the load or his own joints. The engine drops to idle, its rhythm slowing until it fills the space again. He listens for anything out of place, a last complaint hidden in the sound. Nothing rises above the idle. He waits a beat longer than necessary, as if timing might matter, as if shutting it down too soon could undo what he has held together. His legs feel heavy, knees reluctant even at the thought of straightening. He turns the engine off. The vibration disappears too fast, leaving a hollow stillness behind. Easy, he thinks, hands resting on the wheel as the silence settles and the truck finally stands still. When the engine stops, the quiet feels too large for the space it fills. His ears keep reaching for the drone that used to hold everything in place. Silence settles unevenly, broken by distant metal clinks and soft voices moving somewhere beyond the trucks. He opens the door and stands, then sways, boots steady on ground that seems to roll anyway. His palms tingle as he lets his arms hang. Fingers stay curved, half-closed, shaped by hours on the wheel. In the low light, the outlines of trucks blur together, indistinct forms breathing out heat and ticking as they cool. The absence of motion makes his legs feel wrong, as if they have missed a step. A phantom vibration runs through his calves and doesn't fade. He shifts his weight, then shifts it again, body still answering a rhythm that isn't there anymore. Still moving, he thinks, listening to the quiet press and as the convoy rests around him. He lowers himself onto a seat and feels his body reject the stillness at once. Grit clings to his skin, sweat dried into salt that pulls when he shifts. Without the engine's constant motion, the seat feels wrong beneath him, too firm, too quiet. The absence of vibration makes everything feel unstable, as if the ground itself might move again. He becomes aware of his own breathing, loud and uneven in the quiet. Fuel smell lingers in his hair and throat, a sour edge that doesn't fade when he swallows. He looks down at his boots in the dim light, dust settled deep into the creases, and notices his hands trembling where they rest. Cramps tighten in his forearms, fingers flexing and releasing without instruction. He presses his palms together once, then lets them fall apart. The road keeps running behind his eyes, light and motion replaying without order. Exhaustion sits on him without offering sleep, nerves still lit and searching. He exhales, then exhales again, trying to slow himself down. Stop, stop, he thinks, while his body continues to hum with movement that has nowhere to go. He lifts the canteen and drinks, the water lukewarm and flat, carrying the taste of metal and dust with it. The rim feels gritty against his lip. He swallows once, then again, and his mouth stays dry, as if the motion doesn't register. Under weak light, he tears open a ration package and brings it closer, the paper crackling louder than it should. He chews and feels how tiring it is, jaw working without interest. Flavor doesn't arrive, only texture. His throat stays sore, each swallow a small effort. He wipes his hands on his trousers and the burn in his fingertips flares again, sharp enough to draw his attention back to them. Distant footsteps pass, a soft mutter of voices moving somewhere nearby, but he doesn't look up. Eating and drinking turn into tasks to be completed, not relief to be taken. He lowers the canteen, presses his lips together, and thinks, can't taste it, as the night continues around him. He lies down and feels the blanket rough against his skin, dust itching at the back of his neck. The darkness inside the shelter has no clear edges, only a weight that settles unevenly. His eyes close, then open again without instruction, checking the dark as if something might have changed. Distant metal ticks as it cools, the night air moving slowly around the shape of the tent. His limbs stay restless, shifting for a position that never holds. Hands remain curled, fingers bent as if the wheel is still there. He listens for engines that are no longer running and catches only the sound of his own breathing, then his pulse, steady and insistent. The rhythm feels familiar enough to mistake for movement. Sleep does not arrive. The road stays present, light and motion lingering behind his eyes. He exhales and waits, alert without purpose, telling himself to keep watch as the night stretches on.